You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome on into Toronto Sports Rush for the Bet Rivers Network. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, joined by Pierre McGuire for McGuire Mondays. And Pierre, you're in Toronto, at the site of the place we're going to be talking about today, the Leafs, who have dropped back-to-back games after what seemed to be a bit of a glimmer of hope from their third period against Pittsburgh and going into a complete game against Utah. And then everything seemed to collapse when they had a 4-2 lead over Carolina and then lost 5-4. What overall stuck out to you about perhaps this game in particular against the Canes?
I didn't like the whole weekend, Julie, so let's start there. And usually I'm Peter positive, but I'm not going to be with this group. And part of it is I don't think they're managing the puck very well. Part of it is that some of the guys aren't competing hard enough physically. Part of it is their down low coverage is not nearly good enough. Part of it is just turning pucks over at really bad times in the game is a real problem. And to me, the biggest thing is I saw from some guys, not all, because I'll salute Bobby McMahon for standing up after the huge hit on Scott Lawton by Zadorov. Bobby McMahon standing up and doing his chores. So I salute players like that. But there are other guys that could compete a lot harder physically, and they're not doing it right now. This has been really disappointing. This has been the lost weekend for me when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've got to find a way to get more mature as a group, and they got to find a way to be more competitive as a group.
So then if you were in the room or you were managing this team, what would be maybe 2 or 3 things in order to achieve those goals?
I'd be in touch with my pro scouts. I'd want to know what they're hearing on the road about different players that might be available. I'd want to talk to my coaches about different things we could do to make the team better. Clearly getting Christopher Tanev would help a lot. Not having Scott Lawton is a big problem. And, they missed him at the beginning of the year. Now they're going to miss him again. I don't think internally they have replacements for either one of those two players. That's not a knock on any of the young people that have come up and been given a chance, or a Philippe Myers who's been around hockey for a while. I just don't know, with the Leafs expectation level being as high as it is, I don't know internally if they have the right fits to make the team better right now. So I think you're going to have to go out and be proactive on the trade market. So I'd be evaluating my trade options at this point.
Interesting. So you'd be looking a lot outside versus inside the room at this point. Now, we know that there were some subtractions last year, of course, obviously Mitch Marner, but are you at all surprised at sort of the drop-off, the level of drop-off from this team, especially maybe defensively, but right now compared to last year when there haven't been that many changes?
I'm really surprised. I was way more proactive and really positive about this team than a lot of people were. Right now, I look bad. I got it wrong right now. I'll be totally frank with you. I still think there's plenty of racetrack left for this team to cover and get back into the race, so you don't panic. But there clearly are some telltale signs that things aren't exactly where a lot of people thought they would be, including yours truly. So I think they need to be grittier on defense. I think they need to be better in terms of special team situations. And I think more than anything else, guys have to stop making silly plays. If you got a lead in the game and you're in the NHL, you don't need to be fancy and cute. You got to be almost robotic and almost surgical in your approach. And I don't see that happening right now. And I think that's got to be driving Craig Berube around the bend. I really do.
Right, because it kind of feels a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde situation. And I know that you like to look at goal differential sometimes because they are leading the league in goals scored and goals given up at this point, which is really quite wild because they've had a lot of offensive prowess. They did against Carolina, but then on the back end, they allowed 4 breakaways, and they were significantly, severely outshot 47-20. So when you're looking at this, you can't, some teams like to be able to, and they can outscore their defensive woes, but in this case, they can't. So when you're looking at defensively, what kind of structure, how you stop the bleeding right now, while you say your pro scouts are going out and looking for other replacements, what are like 2 or 3 things that you tell the team that they really need to focus in on?
You got to manage the puck inside your own zone, deep in your own zone. You can't be turning the puck over, and you got to support one another deep in your own zone. Number 1. Number 2, at the blue lines, you can't have reckless play at both your blue line and at the opposition blue line. Because if you have reckless play, it leads to counterattack opportunities and it exposes your defense, which right now isn't as strong as I thought it would be and isn't as strong as probably they thought it would be. So there's a lot there, but those are three things. You support the puck in your own zone, manage your own blue line, manage the opposition's blue line in terms of puck possession, and then don't give up odd man rushes. I mean, that's just silly. Don't be doing that. And I'm sure that the coach will have their attention this week. I am sure that it's not going to be all peachy and fuzzy and kind and cute. I think it's going to be hard. I do. I think he's going to turn this into Camp No Fun for a while.
Well, I think that seems to be, I mean, I don't know what the recipe, for success is right now, but it's certainly not what has been going on. Is you could see Jeff O'Neill on the TSN broadcast for the Carolina game just was imitating Craig Berube, putting his hands on his nose, just like above sort of on the arch, just like he can't figure out what's going on. He's trying to, our guys gripping their sticks too hard. I don't think so. But I think that you mentioned someone particularly important that hasn't been playing, and that is Scott Laughton, who's been out. I think, what would you say maybe that Scott Laughton brings to this team that really we're seeing in his absence is what they need?
Face-off play, penalty kill, grit, tenacity, in-your-face determination, a guy that's not afraid to be vocal on the bench. There's a lot that he brings. He brings enthusiasm. He brings vim, vigor, and vitality. He brings a lot of stuff. And it doesn't always have to be the slickest guy. It doesn't always have to be the cutest guy. It has to be the guy that's the hardest. And in a lot of situations, he's a hard player to play against. And right now, I don't see that from most of their guys. I'll give credit where credit's due. Like I think Nick Roy is doing a real good job. I know people are going to get mad at Dakota Joshua for the turnover the other night, but let's just be fair. More times than not, he's not making that play. I think he just tried to be too cute, and that's part of what I was talking about before. More times than not, he's getting pucks in deep. He's first guy in on the forecheck. He's doing responsible things. He made a mistake. It's a fast game played on a slippery surface by mean people. That's just what it is. Sometimes mistakes happen. But he's another guy that I think has played very well, Dakota Joshua, in the role that he's been given. I think Matias Maccelli's starting to evolve. We all know what Johnny Tavares, he's been the most consistent player the entire year. Mm-hmm. Are there other guys that need to be better? Yeah. I know Austin's scoring, but Austin can be better. I know Matthew Nice is starting to get points, but I think Matthew Nice can be better. Willie Nylander, I think, when he's healthy, is doing great. No issues.
Yeah, he seems to be doing pretty well right now.
Yeah. But I think as a team, you can't have, 4 or 5 guys at the top and 8 guys at the bottom. They all kind of got to be in the same groove, and that's not happening right now.
Right. There seems to be a drop-off. So what do you think about Nick Robertson's time with getting more playing time and what he's been able to accomplish so far?
I bet they're happy they didn't trade him. Yeah. You know that, Julie? Like, you think about it, sometimes the best trades you make are the ones you don't make. Mm-hmm. And so right now Nick's playing really well. And you talk about enthusiasm. Check out his facial features after he scores the other night and how enthused he is and how excited. And then all of a sudden, the opposition comes right down and scores. That can't happen. So that's part of what I'm talking about. But I think he's played really well. He deserves a pat on the back, too.
Right. So that is one bright spot for the team. And, we're not just trying to look for bright spots in the darkness. There are things that do need to be given credit. And I think the fact that maybe they can rally around the fact that they've had 3 power play goals in the last 2 games when the power play had been absent, and kind of looking at where are things that we can build on. But I do really think your point about the fact that there's kind of this upper echelon, this higher tier of guys that are playing well. We saw William Nylander with, my gosh, one of the greatest goals for highlights of all time, which when he just was sort of on one leg against Carolina from the face-off circle, essentially. And it was pure magic. And he's been playing so well, but you can't just have those guys up there and then a drop off to the lower guys. I want to look at the defense in particular. How would you rank, Brandon Carlo on this team right now?
He hasn't been as good as what I've seen him do when he was playing in Boston. I'm not going to lie to you. And I think maybe part of that is he's feeling more pressure than what he had in Boston. He plays on the right side, and in Boston on the right side, Charlie McAvoy dominated that position for a long time. So there wasn't as much pressure on Brandon Carlo. You come here now and, probably Jake McCabe's your number 1 right side defenseman, even though he's a left shot. The thing is that, Jake is more of a shutdown guy. He's not an offensive guy. And I don't think Brandon's an offensive guy. So you look at the right side, I mean, they're just not, especially, and Tanev's not an offensive guy. So you don't get a lot of offense out of the right side of your defense. And then you look on the left side, you're probably thinking Oliver Ekman-Larsson can give you a little offense, but he really hasn't. Simone Benoit is not going to give you offense. And
no.
Morgan's your one offensive guy. You're not getting enough points from the back end. That's a problem too.
Certainly. And I think also another point I want to touch on is the fact that we mentioned how they were outshot 47-20, and then even that in that third period against Carolina, 22-2.
Yep.
How do you look at that as their defensive scheme in allowing that many shots on Dennis Hildeby, who's a third string goalie?
The one thing I just want to caution everybody though, because that's a real telltale stat, and you're spot on to bring it up, Julie. The one thing Rod Brindamore, the coach in Carolina, stresses with his team all the time: heavy shot output. He's always stretched shots from everywhere, blue line, top of the circle, bad angle. They're the number one shot team in the league, and they've been doing it for a long time. And that's just kind of how they play. So I don't read too much into that with Carolina. If you were to tell me that Boston did that, or if you were to tell me that the Rangers did that, I'd be like, okay, there's schematic problems. With Carolina, it's one of those stats. It's kind of an outlier just because of the way Rod coaches his team.
Okay, so maybe the shot volume aside, maybe the zone entries and the puck management in being able to even just have those opportunities to begin with. What would you say in terms of what Toronto is not doing enough of that is allowing teams to have control of the puck in their offensive zone?
You know what a good question. So, Julie, I'm just going to tell you that if you go back earlier in the week, last week, we're Monday now, they played a game against Utah. Pucks were always in. Forecheck was there. Force Utah to go 200 feet. They're a speed team. Take their speed out of the game. They played really well. But then you look at the Boston game and you look at last night against Carolina, and it's turnovers. It's odd man rushes. It's not managing the puck. It's not getting the puck in deep. It's not establishing a forecheck. It's all the things that they did in the Utah game that they didn't do against Boston, that they didn't do against Carolina. And if I were Craig Berube, I would keep that tape of the Utah game, because I thought the Leafs played really well in that game. I really do. I thought they played a smart game. And I know Utah's kind of had a tough road trip. They didn't win in Ottawa. They didn't win in Montreal. They didn't win in Toronto. I get it. But they're a good young team, and they're fast. I'm telling you, they're in the top 5 speed quotient teams in the league. But Toronto took their speed out of the game. And Toronto didn't look slow in that game because they did what the coach asked. Chip it, chase it, check it. That's what they did. And it worked. It was awesome.
So that, how do you explain that they go from having a game like that to a game like a weekend like they just did?
Scotty Bowman had a great term, and it's so appropriate that we're here for the Hockey Hall of Fame inductions tonight, because Scotty's obviously one of the greatest coaches ever, and not just in hockey, but in any sport. And he used to tell me all the time when we coached together, never let guys get comfy and never let guys get cozy. Because once comfy and cozy kicks in, it's all downhill. Hockey's not a game for comfy, cozy. And I think these guys get comfortable in Toronto. I think the guys get treated so well. I think they got a little bit giddy after their win against Utah, saying, you know what, we kind of got this going on. We know what's going on right now. We got this figured out. And they let their guard down, and you can't do that. And I think Craig's going to snap them to attention, Julie. I really do.
Right. And I think, like, to add to that point, it feels as though maybe because this team has done so well in getting to the playoffs and in having good regular seasons, that maybe they do have that that bias of sort of we can do this. Like, we can snap out of this. Like, we can flip the switch. But you know, we're getting to game 17, and they are one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference in the league. Like, they're not up where they should be. And they could have been had they won these games this weekend. But it feels as though, I mean, it is so tight that if you are not taking every single moment seriously, you can drop down so quickly. So even having the ability of knowing, hey, well, we lost Mitch Marner, but like, we still have a lot of other guys, but that doesn't mean your team is necessarily in a great position. And so I just worried that like maybe because they are taking their foot off the gas in certain regards, maybe mentally, that's going to actually end up biting them in the butt in the long run, because they have that not a lot has changed, like looking at the roster, but for whatever reason, their identity has been non-existent almost.
It's not the identity you want to see, number one, because it's quote unquote the DNA is going to change. Remember that press conference? The DNA is going to change. Well, they might have tried to change the DNA, but it's actually dropped back. It's worse. I loved how you presented that too, Julie. I thought it was really well done. I was listening. I was captivated because I'm thinking about all the changes they made. You know, we're going to bring in Michelli. We're going to lose Marner. We're going to get Nicky Roy because he's a grinding guy and he's a good third liner, and he is. But he's not going to get you a ton of points, even though he's doing that. We're going to go out and get Dakota Joshua because he's a bigger guy. He's a grinding guy. That changes our DNA. We're going to get Lawton last spring because, you know what, he's a good force center. And if we go Matthews, Tavares, Lawton, and or Roy, depending on how you want to flip-flop them, we're really structured down the middle. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, but the DNA hasn't changed. And here's the cautionary tale. Because of the way you just presented what you did, which I thought was really good. Ottawa's good, and they're not playing great. And they don't have Brady Tkachuk, but they're good, and they're ahead of the Leafs. Montreal's really good, and they're really fast. And they got a whack of guys coming from college, and they got a whack of guys coming from the American Hockey League, and they got another really good Russian who's not as good as Demidov, but he's close. So I'm just telling you, like if you look in their division, the Leafs division, the Atlantic, Ottawa, Toronto, good. Boston just beat them. Florida's starting to get out of whatever ailed them. Tampa's back and they're alive again.
Yeah.
So you got a problem if you're Toronto right now. And, you know, I'm not saying that you have to panic, but I think you're going to have to get the attention of the guys here pretty quick. And I think I didn't want to say it, but I think they're going to have to shake the tree. You asked me at the beginning what I'd do. I'd be in meeting with my pro scouts and my coaches. And I'd say, what do we need to do to get this thing awake? Because right now it's not awake.
I think that's a fantastic point. And I think that that's what they tried to do last year after they lost to Florida was they did shake the tree, right? They got rid of the Shanaplan situation that was going on. And of course, we know that Marner left and a lot of different changes happened. So I don't see this organization and this management team as being afraid to make those changes if they have to, because they know the pressure's on, especially with some of these guys right in their prime. Now, just before we wrap up, got to get to the goalie situation. We know that Joseph Woll is playing with the Marlies, and it looks like we hope that he'll be back. Not sure his situation in particular, but how do you feel things are going right now with Toronto's goalie situation, knowing that Anthony Stolarz has been playing more than he has been used to?
He's definitely 100%. So some guys are used to having that scrutiny. Marty Brodeur, Patrick Roy. You know, you look at the Tommy Barrasso. You look at the great ones. Eddie Belfour. They love that. They love the scrutiny. They love the pressure. They love everything on them. Remember when Anthony Stolarz earlier this year kind of said, hey, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. We need to be better. We need to do this. Once you do that as a goalie, you put a lot of spotlight on yourself. And if you've never had that spotlight before, and he really never has had it like that, it can be a little bit debilitating and it can be a little bit intimidating and it can put a lot of pressure on you. And I think that's where it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean he's not going to play well, but he's going to have to figure out how to do this, Julie. And to me, the biggest thing is once Caden Primo got put on waivers, I had the sneaking suspicion that, you know, Joseph Woll was going to eventually be up with the team sooner rather than later. Eventually, I think he's going to be a real good goalie for this group. But right now, I think the best place for him is in the American Hockey League, and the best place for Joe Woll is to play a little bit more, then come up in the NHL.
Right. Well, we hope that Joseph Woll is able to come back with the team for himself and for everyone else on the team. And we know that, Pierre, the Leafs are facing the Bruins again on Tuesday. What are 3 things you want to see from them after what they've been through?
Establish physicality early on. Don't get pushed around by Zadorov. And to me, the biggest thing, create a cycle situation in the offensive zone where you break down the Boston Bruins defense. I didn't like the way the Toronto Maple Leafs handled the puck the other day. And I think that's a bit of a problem. If you can go in there, dominate the puck, especially off the cycle situation, don't get pushed around by people, and don't take penalties, I think they got a real good chance to get back on track. But they got to bring they got to bring vim, vigor, and vitality that we talked about before, because I hadn't seen it in the last couple games.
No, we have not seen that. And they did have some opportunities late against Carolina where that vim, vigor, and vitality would have certainly helped them being able to take that thing at least to overtime, which they could not do. Pierre McGuire, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the Hockey Hall of Fame induction night in Toronto, and we will see you next Monday for McGuire Mondays here on Toronto Sports Rush for the Bet Rivers Network.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.